Welcome everyone. The hour being 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, November 15th, 2023. The Tooele City Council and the Redevelopment Agency are meeting in a work meeting being held at Tooele City Hall in the council chambers located at 90 North Main Street. This is also being broadcast on the Tooele City YouTube channel. We will start with a roll call. Councilwoman Manzione.
Present.
Councilman Graff.
Present.
Councilman Hanson.
Present.
Councilman McCall.
Present.
I'm Councilman Brady. I'm also present. We will move on to item 3, which is the mayor's report.
Thank you, Chairman and Council. The first thing that I just wanted to do is again express my gratitude for everyone that responded on Friday, November 3rd to the terrible accident that happened in our city. And it would take me a long time to start naming all of the organizations, the residents themselves, of course, our emergency responders. Everyone stepped up that day, partnered, worked together, and took care of that horrible incident. So I just want everyone to know how much I appreciate how we take care of each other when we have those terrible things happen. So thank you again. I just want to also, I'm not really sure how many people watch this session of city council meetings, the work meetings, but I always have messages I want to share with residents. And, you know, we've been asked for quite some time to build a dog park. It's just about complete. I understand they were finally putting gates on the other day. We hope that it will be ready very soon. But we've already got down at the park many garbage cans and also some of the little stations with the doggy bags, and ask residents to please pick up after their dogs and take care of them. Well, the dog park's not quite open yet, but that park is already being run over with animals. So many dogs are down there. Many are unleashed with their owners there, but they are unleashed, which is against the law. They also have many down there that are running without tags. We have found that some are licensed, but they've not put their tag on them. So it's difficult to find who the owner is. Normally, they're not strays. They're someone's dogs that they've just let out to run. But I have a resident that I hear from him once in a while, and he is always so thoughtful to express his appreciation for what we have, and then really tell me what the problem is and maybe how we could fix it. And he walks down there quite often with his dog, who is licensed on a leash. And just in one day, he walked around the outside of the park, on the sidewalk around it, and he said there were 33 piles of dog mess on the sidewalk or very close to it. Some were right next to where the little doggy bags were. This is unacceptable. You know, we joke around sometimes and say that's why we can't have nice things, but you know what? That's why we can't have nice things. And the dog park will be open as soon as we can get it open, but even then the dogs need to be on a leash until they get into that enclosure. This is about safety, and we continue to have a large number of animals just running around the city. We do not have space at the animal shelter for everyone's dogs that they're not taking care of that may get picked up. We finally identify an owner, then they pick them up a week later. We just don't have the capacity for that, so I'm just asking the residents, please, again, be responsible for your animals, because I know there are thousands of good pet owners in this city, and they're taking care of theirs. We expect that to happen with everyone's. The last is, I just want to remind everyone, I know it's really nice and warm out there. It was a very nice day today. We really do hope that the snow is coming eventually here. Just reminding everyone that we still see a lot of piles of landscaping materials on our roads, which again is also against the law. We've been a little lenient with some of them. We remind them and tell them they can't have those rocks there. Please get them taken care of. And some of them are very responsive and some are not, but those are very dangerous when it snows. And just to remind people that you really need to be parking on your own property. Right now we have a high incidence of DUIs that are hitting parked cars. So if you want your car safer, keep it in your keep it on your property and keep it off of the road as much as possible, and then it will help us when we have the snow fly. So that is all I have for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Nguyen. We'll move on to item 4, which is the council members' report. We will start with Councilman McCall.
I didn't write it down, but I can't remember what I did, but I know I did something. So I have nothing to report.
All right.
I was trying to remember. I know I was there. The mayor was there, but I just can't remember.
We went to the chamber luncheon
Yeah, I went to
today.
the chamber.
Well, I went there today, but I did something else.
What else did you do?
Central States.
Yes, I went to Central States. I know there was a couple of things, and then and Veterans Day, which I didn't see any of you guys. And Kaylee sang beautifully, didn't she, Mayor? No, but Kaylee sang beautifully. Kaylee? Yeah. Kylie. My bad, I said Kaylee, it's Kylie. Yep, she did a great job. That's all I have, sir.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Dave. Councilman Hanson.
I forgot. No, I'm just kidding. I went to the chamber luncheon today, and the city did a great job of presenting about the homeless situation and what's happening with the new homeless shelter coming and stuff. So good job, you guys. Okay, but yeah, I appreciated it. And then the last couple weeks, I got to hang out with 4-H and FFA kids doing turkeys.
That's awesome.
It was cool, and they did a good job. And Mayor Nguyen came down Monday night for the sale for the kids, and she's seen the program. But it's a great program, and I got a bunch of grandkids doing it too. But it was fun to be there with them. And this week, we get to slaughter the rest of them this weekend. So yay!
Wow.
Anyway, it is fun.
All right,
You don't think that's fun?
I think that's fun. I was
Yeah, okay.
laughing because Tony said that's sad, so.
That's sad. You like turkey too.
Do you eat turkey?
I love turkey, yeah.
I mean, they are ugly, but yeah.
All right, Councilman Graff.
Thank you. I had a chance to meet with Jay Fisher again. I wanted to sit down and learn about their process that they followed with Midvale City and their city council and trying to get affordable housing. And they provided me additional materials, which I'm happy to share with all of you. I'm just trying to learn, and it's been an interesting process. I also had a chance to attend the Arts Council meeting, and there's some exciting things going on that I am just super excited about that I think will be a huge benefit to our city. Also attended the Chamber of Commerce luncheon talking about homelessness and SwitchPoint, and I thought it was really informative. I thought Chief Day and the mayor did a great job talking about it, and also hearing from SwitchPoint. I'm really excited for that to go online. It's been well needed, and I remember just listening when I first came on the council to conceptually, and I know Ed's done a lot of work in that area, and so I'm so excited that we have this in our community. It is really unique for a community our size to have something like this. It is on the forefront, and I'm excited that it's been a priority and it's finally coming to fruition. Finally, I had a resident reach out to me, and she reached out to me about 6 months ago and reached out to me again, talking about extending the hours for walking at the Dow James. And I think what is interesting is 6 months ago, the Boys and Girls Club was in that building, and there was some limitations on time. Now, I believe that they are now out in their new building, which is gorgeous. And so she wanted me to inquire, and I'll talk to Darwin as well, to see the possibility of extending the hours now that there may be a little bit more flexibility, and allegedly it's going to get colder. And I'm sure that will happen sooner than later. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilwoman Manzio.
Sure. I echo the same thoughts about the chamber luncheon. Good job, everyone. It was very informative, and there were a lot of questions, which was good. So people wanted to be informed. And the same for the Arts Council. Very exciting news to look forward to in December. I also attended the Tooele County branding thing, I don't know, program. And so they sent the t-shirts, hats, and stickers for everybody. Pick those up if you don't like. I just randomly threw them out, so trade if you don't like it. It's fun. And then I had the same resident reach out to me about walking at the Dow James. And then another resident that I spoke to about some crosswalks around England Acres across to 1000 North, which I spoke with the mayor about. And the great thing about that conversation was he presented some solutions, and that's always nice, like you said in your mayor's report, to have some good dialogue with somebody and some proposed solutions, even if they don't work out. It's the thought, speaking together about that. So I appreciate that, and that is all I have.
Thank you. All right, we had a tree board meeting on November 9th. It had been a while since we met, but there were some great ideas about how we can get more trees planted in our community. One of the ideas that was brought up was, I guess you can buy like hundreds of little saplings that are bare root and try to offer those to residents and maybe even try some in our parks. I'm no tree expert, but one of the members that was there knows a lot about trees and says they grow just as well and they actually root better, so they don't just die like some of our trees in our parks. So that's an idea that we're considering, and I believe Darwin was going to talk with the mayor about maybe moving forward with that. So exciting things with the tree board. I attended my weekly staff meeting. I received a lot of those same concerns about the Dow James walking. I had an email about traffic, and that's just in the forefront of everyone's mind right now with that incident we had a few weeks ago. And I think that concludes my report. So we will move on to our discussion items. Our first one is a discussion on solid waste fee. This is presented by Fred Philpott from Lewis, Young, Robertson, and Birmingham, Inc., and then Shannon Wimmer as well.
Good evening, Council. As you may recall, back in July, we signed a contract with, they're now LRB, Public Finance Advisors, but it's Lewis, Young, Robertson, and Birmingham, to review all of our utility fees for us. It hasn't been done in quite some time. So they are actually, we had already done the recycling fees, but we decided to do the solid waste, the water, and the sewer. So Fred over there has been doing a great job working on those for us. But as we have gone through closing out the fiscal year 23, it came to our attention that the solid waste fund particularly is in dire need of this fee review. They decreased their fund balance in fiscal year 23, which means they exceeded the expenses exceeded their revenue by $233,385, which took their fund balance down to $11,942. So obviously we are not comfortable with that fund balance. And so I worked with Fred and asked him if we could pull the solid waste fees out and get those done immediately, and then we'll continue working on the water and sewer, which we hope to bring you a review in February. So Fred has done a great job reviewing these fees, and he will take some time and go over the data and how he has come up with what we will propose, what we think the new rates for these services need to be so that we can properly provide the solid waste service and cover the cost that entails. So, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions or take any feedback that the council has once he goes over that data with you, and then so that we could move forward and bring that back to the council to adopt new fees if you're ready, or we will make whatever changes that are requested at that time. And then just so you know, once we adopt it, there is a 60-day waiting period before those fees go into effect. So as you go over the data, you'll see a lot of that's not affecting fiscal year 24, and that's because that's what we're in right now. And best case scenario, we will see these new fees probably in February, depending on how fast we can move from here. So I'll turn the time over to Fred Philpott, and he will present the data for you.
Thank you, Shannon. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. What about, I've shared my screen with my presentation. Are you able to see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Yes, as Shannon indicated, my name is Fred Philpott. I'm from LRB Public Finance. And we've got a short presentation to summarize the solid waste analysis and the assumptions we've made with regards to financial pro forma and comparing that to the targets we've set for that fund. So with regards to the model, we're using historic budget information and demand data provided by staff, and we're making projections based on fiscal year 2023 and fiscal year 24 data, and then projecting that through 2029. We typically, when we do a rate study, we'll look at a 5-year planning horizon with all of our growth assumptions and rate scenarios designed to look at that 5-year planning window. We build the model beyond that 5-year planning horizon to see some of the long-term impacts. And we also recommend that while this provides a 5-year look, often assumptions may shift, especially in the environment we're in now, where we have had historically high inflation, which may or may not go away. Those types of changes, staff and you as legislators should continue to think about, and if there are substantial changes to those assumptions, that may trigger a revision to the analysis within that 5-year window. So we just need to stay on top of that and make sure this is a living analysis so that you don't get behind the 8 ball again. As Shannon indicated, our starting point relative to fund balance is about $11,000, and then we're looking at the fund balance carryover from year to year as we make projections into the future. Our goal is to try to get to 120 days of working capital in reserve. What that means is you have approximately 120 days of operating revenues in the bank that you carry over, or at least we're getting to that point, so that if you had no revenues come in, you could operate for 120 days. With regards to our scenario analysis, in order to achieve our objectives relative to that cash reserves based on the growth and costs and our demand assumptions, we need effectively a 27% rate increase beginning in fiscal year 2025. We've programmed an upfront rate increase, meaning it's all that new revenue is baked into the first year. And then we don't see any additional rate increases in the year 2 through 5 based on the assumptions. Again, that comes with a little bit of an asterisk that you should still watch those assumptions and the pro forma to ensure that we're achieving the necessary performance targets. And if there are changes, then we'd modify that as needed. In addition, we have the recycling rate set to what was previously adopted by the council. So that is also being structured into the scenario analysis. So what that does for the garbage or the solid waste side is the rate for the first can goes from $11 up to $13, so we're seeing a $2 increase. And then the additional can fee goes from $5.50 up to $6.50, so a $1 increase. Here is the pro forma relative to those assumptions. Again, you can see the starting point at 11,000 and some change there. And as we move forward, we start to build some additional reserves. We don't quite get to the 120 days, but the trend line is showing a positive growth in the fund balance to get us closer to that target. So based on my discussion with Shannon, we looked at rounding that number to an even $2 increase to get us close to that target amount. There's not a lot of expenditure impacts other than your operating expense baked into this model. So we don't have any bond proceeds or debt service that we need to worry about. We don't have robust CIP that we need to look at. So really, these rate increases are to ensure that you can operate this enterprise fund, which is very critical. It also limits the types of scenarios that we can look at because there isn't a lot of one-time expenses that we're trying to cover and potentially move around to mitigate rate increase. So really, this is all about ensuring that you have sufficient revenues to cover your operating expense. Again, the scenario we're recommending is an upfront increase that puts, based on a 27% increase, going to $13 and $6.50 respectively. So that's a pretty quick run through of our analysis. I've also provided Shannon with a memo of our findings relative to the solid waste fund, and I can discuss our analysis or address any questions you might have.
All right, any questions from the council?
One brief question, what does CIP stand for?
Oh, sorry, Capital Improvement Plan. There's also another acronym, CFP, which is a Capital Facilities Plan, but it's the capital projects that may be necessary for enterprise funds. So you see a lot of that in your road. You have road projects, your water, sewer, storm will have substantial capital improvement plan projects.
Thank you.
Is it pretty standard to have a 120-day working capital minimum in other cities? Is that standard?
Yeah, they range from 90 to, most entities will range from 90 to 150 actually. That's usually where a lot of entities will try to get to 150 days. That allows, if you go to issue debt, for example, in an enterprise fund, it secures a little bit better rating as you start getting to 150 to 365 days. Here, where we're not really looking at some of those scenarios for the garbage or solid waste fund, we didn't think we needed to get all the way up to that 150 days, but by bringing in the 120-day target, it allows for, if you have some expenditure increases that exceed what our model assumes, there's a cushion there to absorb some of that. If you do have some equipment expense that we haven't accounted for, you can absorb some of that without future rate increases. So it gives you enough cushion there to absorb some of those unknowns without building too robust of a fund balance.
Any other questions?
And then just to clarify, council, I don't know if it was in there, but our current rate is $11, so it's a $2 per can on a first can and then $1 on a second can. And we did have some capital projects in this fund prior. We were going to build just a cover to put the cans in so that when it snows and rains, they don't get in there before we can get them delivered and while we're waiting. But with the lease or with us moving over to the bus garage, we think we're going to have some areas to store those, so we've taken that out. The only other thing we've ever purchased out of there as capital improvement was a vehicle to deliver the cans, and that we didn't put one in as well just to keep these as low as we possibly could. And you see it gets us, we're shooting for 120 days, but we're only going to make it to 108 with that fee.
Just out of curiosity, is there a maximum amount of cans that a resident can have?
Yes, and you're going to put me on the spot, but I think it's 4.
Okay.
It might be 5, but yes, ACE
But-
actually limits that.
Just any additional can is the same fee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so I think they can have 1 first can and 4 extra. Don't quote me on that one, I'd have to look, but I think total of 5, but it is limited.
I was just curious. Testing your knowledge.
There's people in my neighborhood that's got like 4, and I think one does have close to 5. He might have 5, I don't know. But they have a lot of kids.
Most of the reasons that the cost has greatly increased is that, of course, fuel has been one of the bigger ones. The other is just that the Tooele County landfill fees have increased. So that's your 2 cost increases.
And that's the hard part, and that's what Fred is alluding to, is to say, to cover those costs, sometimes they come so quick and we don't have enough time to react, I mean, to have this go down to 11,000 was a shock, and sometimes there's just not enough time to foresee that coming and get the rates out in advance, which is why we need at least 120 days, 100, whatever days we can get, so that if that happens, we can still pay the bills and then redo the fee just like we're doing right now.
Okay. All right, any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Fred.
Thank you. Yeah, of
Thanks,
course.
Fred.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next discussion item, which is a discussion on the Utah State Retirement Tier 2 pension rates update, presented by Cammie Perkins, the Human Resource Director.
Okay, I'm going to let them get everything up First of all, I'd like to commend you guys. You're going to get an excellent assistant to the city council. Loretta was a great employee, and we're really excited to see her promote. You're going to be very happy with her services, even if it meant we had to say goodbye to her on the HR team. So she kind of knows my flow and has been around with this topic for a while, so hopefully this will flow okay for you. I wanted to just give our elected officials an update on something that has the potential to impact our labor costs come March and July as we're putting things together. There's some unknowns that are going on right now, and I want you in the know because you may be hearing a few things about this. So we're going to take a little tour backwards, and some of you may or may not remember when the Utah State Retirement System created a Tier 1 and a Tier 2 plan. Are y'all shaking your head? Tony understands, a few understand. The Tier 2 plan was basically trying to make the system financially stable and dealing with some of the other downturns that impacted our Tier 1. Since then, part of what was put into that law was it capped the rates that agencies would have to pay for participation in the Tier 2 plan. It limited most of our, I'm going to refer to our regular workforce, to be a 10% cost, and public safety was a 12% cost. So that was trying to help control that. And it changed who's eligible and the whole structure on the plan, but we won't get into all of that. We've been fortunate that for many years those rates have held firm. And they just announced to us that there are some changes that finally will hit us, and it's going to result in us having to make a few decisions. We don't have to make the decisions now, but I want you on the back end so you know what's going on. So if you'll go to the next slide for me. Every so often they have the plan reviewed, and they have an actuarial evaluation done on the plan. And that is the really smart numbers people. What Glenn Caldwell used to say is it's the really smart accountants that don't have the people skills. But I've met some great actuaries. I just always have to tell them, you have to dumb it down for me in terms I can understand. The URS put together a training for all of us, HR and accounting professionals, just to give us a heads up on what's coming down the road, how we got there, what they're looking at. And when they do their actual actuarial valuation, they use some assumptions, just like we all do as we're preparing budgets. Some of them are economic assumptions, and some of them were demographic assumptions. And like it's impacting all of our finances, some of those assumptions dramatically changed over the last few years. If you'll go ahead and switch for me, Loretta. A few of them dealt with the economic. A big one was in the demographic assumptions, and they explained that the salaries really escalated. Mortality rates have changed. They've seen an increase in their disability incidents, and then some other issues. This big one that's called what? Price inflation, right? That came into play. Next one for us. This is just a graph that they provided to us that explains for us what the original assumption was in terms of what they expected to see in overall wage growth for each year. And then they've got a second one that is showing the current experience study and what they expected it to be and what the actual increases were going to be on average in the plan. Those types of increases then on an actuary evaluation will impact what they thought they would pay out in benefits to what actually is going to be paid in benefits. Next slide for me. The Tier 2 plan, remember I used the term that we have a 10% cap basically on the rate. And what happened in Tier 2 is they said, okay, if there's a 10% cap, they formulate the cost of the pension plan, and then the difference between that as an employer, we would put into the employee's 401k account. The opposite of that happens if the rate for the pension plan goes above 10%, then the employee has to pick up the difference in the rate unless we choose to take an option available to us. If you'll switch the next slide. What they've showed us now is that the cost for the retirement benefit has now gone above 10%. For the public safety, a few years ago, you may recall when we changed it and it went to 12%. I've brought to you what's called a pickup election over the year. So their plan actually is now at 14%, and you can see that they're anticipating it's going to be about 18.73 because of that 4.3%. Because those are going over the limit, that's going to put it in a position now where that cost has the potential to be passed on and paid for by the employee. That's going to be the green column that you're going to see. Next one, Loretta. So what may happen is the pension rate now is 10.7%. You notice there's now no 401k contribution, but out of the employee pocket would become 0.7. This is on the general employees. Next one. On public safety, it's a little bit different because the public safety, we're currently doing what we call the pickup election, meaning that theirs went above 14%. Remember when there was a percentage that was passed on to the employee, we made the decision as an agency, we're going to pick that up, as well as a lot of public agencies did that. Now that pickup election has the potential to go from 2.6% all the way up to 4.73%. So I want you to think of 5% cost on your public safety potentially there. Go ahead to the next one. There's a lot that still is left to be determined, and this is really important for us to understand. Back when they changed the public safety plan, they incorporated that pickup election, which said, okay, the employee has to pay it, but you as an agency can choose to pay that on behalf of the employee. That got incorporated into the law when they revised that retirement system a few years ago. Unfortunately, that is not currently written into the law for the general employees' retirement plan, okay? So there's a lot that still is unknown, and we're waiting to see what happens with this legislative session. There's some speculation on what might happen. There's some speculation that the legislature may have some proposals come through that raise that rate from 10% to 11%, from 14 to 16, however that might come. There's some speculation that there might be some legislation proposed that on the general plan, it allows us to also decide, do we pass it on? Are we going to pick it up? So that's going to create some decisions for us to make kind of late in the game in formulating our budget, right? Legislature closes and is over, what, about March time period? That's when we're starting to really put together numbers to bring to you guys for a proposal. So I want to just get that on your brains so that you can kind of know, and when you're hearing people talk about the retirement system changing, the cost of pension changing, you know what's going on and have a little bit of an idea of some of the issues. I ran some rough numbers for us. I took our current labor projections from what I prepared for the mayor last year for the budget, and I said, okay, what is the worst case scenario for us? Let's assume that they pass legislation, you decide as the council, you're gonna pick it up. Some of the portions of the rates actually gone down because the tier 1 plan is getting more financially solvent. But I threw all those in that said, if we have worst case scenario, the city picks all this cost up because of some of the other changes in terms of how we fund tier 1, our plan cost actually goes down by $25,000. Public safety goes up quite a bit, but the rest of us go down. So there's some decisions that we will need to be making. If you'll switch to the next slide for me, Loretta, just some decisions that we'll need to be making. They sound really big, but there's another component that we have to pay for. It's a term called the unfunded liability back to tier 1. Those rates are going down, but there is still just a lot of unknown. As we get moving forward, we'll do our best to communicate with you and let you know what some decisions are that you're going to have to make, because I do understand labor costs are always the biggest part of the budget. So I just wanted you in the loop on what was going on so that as you heard about this, you knew what that meant and potentially what it might mean to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee. All right, we'll move on to our next discussion item, which is a discussion on a summary of proposed subdivision process amendments. This is going to be presented, Roger's not here, right? Oh, yeah, we're tabling this one. I forgot. We talked about that in staff meeting. Okay, so we're just going to table that discussion item. All right. Item D is a discussion on amendments to Tooele City Code 7-11A-18, Design Standards, Building Materials, Tooele City Code 7-11A-12, Design Standards, Landscaping, and 7-11A-25, Deviation from Design Standards. Amendments proposed by Tooele City, presented by Andrew Agard, the Community Development Director.
Thank you, Chairman Brady, members of the City Council. I appreciate you taking your time to discuss some of these ordinance amendments with me tonight. There's quite a few here, so I'll do the best I can to be brief. You are familiar with the design standards, building materials. We've had some presentations to the City Council in the past regarding how the city currently requires exterior materials on multifamily residential units. Resulting from that, the City Council asked me to take a look at this and bring back an alternative or a proposal in regards to the exterior materials that we're requiring on multifamily residential structures. There's also a couple of other ordinances that are within Tooele City Code 7-11A that are involving multifamily residential. Another one is Section 12, which is landscaping. This relates to the number of trees, the number of shrubs. And then also deviation from design standards. It's all the same ordinance, so I thought let's lump them in together and see if we can move these changes through as one. So to start, you're familiar with this ordinance. The issue at hand was we currently require 50% of total exterior of multifamily residential structures to be brick or stone, with 60% of that being on the front facade. We have received a lot of feedback from developers that this requirement is causing their units to be unable to be sold, unsellable. I don't personally agree with that, but we'll leave that for another discussion and so forth. But that's our current requirement, and then there's some materials that they can use on the remaining facades, such as brick, stone, stucco, clapboard, wood, vinyl, and so forth. Some of the changes that I'm proposing are as follows. I propose that we reduce the amount of brick and stone on front facades as well as public street-facing facades to 20%. And then remaining exterior wall materials shall utilize at least 3 of an expanded list of materials. And those materials are shown there. That list just comes from what is currently popular, what builders are using on the outsides of their buildings. And then the other criteria that I'm proposing is that not more than 30% of the exterior not requiring brick or stone shall be covered by one of the materials listed in the list. This is to ensure that we have some architectural variety, that we have some aesthetics and some design work in the buildings, and also to encourage unit definition. So in my research, I came across some elevations that I believe accurately represent what that ordinance would bring us. This is a townhouse with single-car garages, which our code does permit. And you can see that the stone is not the predominant material on the building exterior. My calculations is estimated about 20%, maybe a little bit more, but pretty close. And we also have some vertical siding, some horizontal siding, and then some composite wood panels. It offers some great architectural, visual architectural elements to observe. This is another one fairly similar to the previous one. The brick and stone is used more as an element. And then we have alternating materials throughout the facade. This one, you'll note that there's board and batten siding, some shake siding, as well as some fiber cement siding, with the stone and brick being largely accent materials at the garages and at the entrances. This one I felt was interesting. You'll note that their brick is one entire unit. And the way the ordinance is structured, or the way I've structured these proposals, is that it doesn't have to be brick and stone on every unit. This would be a calculation that relates to the structure itself. And so they would be free to make one unit entirely brick or stone and do the rest of the units in another material and still meet the ordinance requirements. This elevation I particularly liked because it has great unit definition. If somebody lives in that end unit, they can easily tell their friends, I live in the red unit, come see me. Whereas in some townhomes, there's no variation in appearance. And then you can see there's still stone and brick on that facade. And then just another example of what I believe this ordinance amendment would bring the city. So this is the ordinance language as proposed if it were to be adopted by the city council. Again, it relates to 20% of the front and street-facing facades being brick or stone. Requires at least 3 of the materials utilized in the list above and beyond the brick and stone. And then it requires or limits each individual material to 30% of the wall facade. So they would have to make sure that those are evenly spaced throughout the facade. It also does not prohibit them from using 4 materials or 5. They'd be free to use their creativity there as long as those materials don't exceed 30%. Some of the anticipated benefits of this code amendment, there would be some reduction in building materials and labor costs to hopefully provide some reduction in housing costs. However, based upon previous studies, it's not going to be that significant to take a $400,000 townhome and make it suddenly affordable. But a little bit here, a little bit there. Number 2, this could provide greater flexibility for architects to design aesthetically pleasing buildings using a wider range of materials. Number 3, maintaining visually pleasing architecture and avoid monotonous row house design. Number 4, maintain architectural emphasis on highly visible facades. And then number 5, maintains good unit definition. So those are some of the anticipated benefits I could see from this proposed code. Moving on into the tree and shrub requirements. I'll be honest with you, the reason I'm presenting this code before you is because the current code we have is extremely cumbersome. And it's extremely difficult, not only for staff to interpret when we're doing reviews, but also for developers when they're putting together their plans. And the reason why is right now our tree requirements are based on what is called a building section. And a building section is defined as an area between building entrances, the area between a building entrance and the edge of the facade, or the number of horizontal units behind the facade where there are no building entrances. So when I get a site plan, I'm not the planner anymore, but when I was the planner, when I get a site plan or a landscape plan to verify the number of trees, I would first have to calculate the building sections. And then when I take the building sections, I have to analyze what is adjacent to. So if the building sections are adjacent to a public street, is that public street an arterial, a collector, a local class? Is that building section next to open space? Is it next to a parking lot? Is it next to a property that's not part of the development? Is it next to another building? And then the tree requirement is based upon that. The problem with this code is it's been difficult for applicant and staff to interpret, resulting in frequent disagreements between the staff and applicants regarding actual tree requirements. The code also results in placement of trees in areas where the tree cannot survive or where the tree is of no value to the development. And then when the code is applied to townhome developments, it does not work. The reason being is you've seen townhome developments, their fronts are almost always drive approaches. Where do we put the trees in the front? So those are some problems there. I like codes to be simple. I've been a planner for 22 years, and simple codes are the way to go. It's easier for staff to do their review. It's easier for the public to comply with the code. It's easier for the developer to design according to the code. So I'm proposing that we simplify our tree requirement. And so there are 6 requirements for trees, and that is basically every development shall provide 20 trees per acre. You have 1 acre of development, you provide 20 trees. The trees shall have a 60-40 ratio of deciduous versus coniferous. I like this ratio because during the winter it's nice to have some trees that have some green on them. 40% of the trees shall be located in closer to within 100 feet of any public right-of-way. So we want to have the trees a little more dense, closer to the streets. And then 40% of the trees shall be located in or adjacent to common areas with a dedicated recreational purpose. Again, the purpose of trees is to have recreational value, provide shade and other things. We don't want to have the trees placed in areas where they don't have any value. And then in regards to the shrub requirement would be similar. It's just 50 shrubs per acre, 50-50 ratio of deciduous versus coniferous varieties, and then both sections include a requirement for drip systems and irrigation. So those are the requirements that the amendments I'm proposing for the tree requirement. And then the last one relates to Tooele City Code 7-11A25, deviation from design standards. I'm recommending we strike this from the code altogether. The reason being is this code is cumbersome and difficult to interpret and to understand for both staff and the applicants. And you're familiar with the last request we had, in which my opinion was a clown show. It has nothing to do with the city council, had nothing to do with staff, but the applicant had no idea what they were doing. They were not following the code, and then they weren't following staff's direction. And it just didn't go well. Number two, the city council has indicated that it is not interested in picking and choosing who gets the deviation and who doesn't. I think I concur. We need to be able to apply these standards equally to all developments, and that's where the city council directed me. Number four, the city has established design standards. Why do we want to provide a mechanism to deviate from those? And then if we do want to deviate, those design standards can be changed through the ordinance amendment process, which is what we're doing tonight. So those are the changes that I'm proposing for 7-11A multifamily residential design guidelines. I'm happy to answer any questions from you. I'm happy to take suggestions if you want to tweak some things. I need your feedback before we decide to start moving it through the public process.
All right, questions or comments?
How did you come up with 20%? Just random?
No, it's Jim has said this in the past, but one of the rules of planning is plagiarizing. And so we look through other codes, and I worked through 2 previous jurisdictions, and I have a pretty good knowledge of their codes. And when I was in Riverton, we never had a problem with 20%, and that's what they did, so I just threw that in there.
So, I 100% with you on striking the deviation.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, saves heartache from both sides of this place. And for developers, for ourselves, for staff, I think that just makes sense that we just come up with code design standards that we all can live with, and then we don't have to worry about that. I think that's brilliant. Simplicity is good. In regards to the design standards, 20% seems low to me. The second house I ever bought was a townhome in West Valley, Balmoral Estates, and they did not have any stone requirements, and it did not age well. It was all vinyl, and it just didn't age well. Vinyl seems to oxidize and get hard and brittle, and I know technology, I'm sure somebody can tell me how it's improved over time, but my worry is that it creates we will see a lot more vinyl as opposed to other design materials being used, which vinyl has its place. But I just fear that we go to the 20% and then the option of one can be all stone, and I think that will be more the rule than the exception. And I understandably, developers want to maximize profits. We've heard that. I understand that. That's free markets. I respect that. But I think we should set a standard that ensures that what we look at for the rest of our lives is something that we can live with. And I appreciate you using other codes from other places. To me, it's just, and this is no fault of yours. You are proposing and asking for feedback. I think, and I hate to pick a number out of the blue, but for me, it's somewhere between 35 to 40% is what I would like to see, offering compromise but also not offering too much of a compromise on how our city will look, because we have a lot of new developments coming in, and quite honestly, that's going to affect how we look. Just my thoughts.
Can I give you a follow-up on that?
Sure.
Would that be for the entire building facade or just for the front and street-facing facades?
Right now, we have the entire facade.
Right now, it's the entire facade. So even the less visible facades have that requirement.
And the reason why I hesitate is because I think of the house I used to live in here in Tooele, and for some reason, my house is rear-facing, my former house, and they didn't put any stucco on the back. They put vinyl on the back, and to me, it looks ridiculous because it's the only one they did. Maybe they just didn't like me, but so when I think about that, I think that there is value in all the way around. Even though I know it costs more, it makes the neighborhood look a little bit more upscale. And I'm not saying we need to keep up with the Joneses, but there's value to that, and especially with, and I'm thinking of Overlake, we get these little micro windstorms that just tear off vinyl, and it always seems to pick the vinyl on the side, not on the front.
Right.
And so I'm thinking about that when I respond. I personally, and I recognize the council may feel differently, it should be an all-around standard all the way around the building, but that's just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
I agree in parts. I think the 20% is a little lower than I would like to go. I don't know if I have an exact number. I would probably be 30%. I just think if we're decreasing it by more than 50%, it's a little more than I want to go. So I'd be more in the 30% area. I can see both sides of this argument of around the whole structure or just on the certain areas of it. So I don't know if I have a strong opinion right now on that. I want to think about that a little bit more. With the trees, though, I don't have any concerns with that. My only question is that enough trees per acre, 20 trees per acre? Do we try to set the standard a little bit higher, like 25? I don't know what's standard in other cities, but being part of a Tree City USA, I think we should have a standard that is saying, hey, we want trees in our community, and especially in these multifamily areas. So just want to make sure that that's not too low either.
20 trees is a pretty good number.
Okay.
It does yield quite a few trees. We could go to 25, and really you could set that number wherever you want because there's different types and different sizes of trees. You could do dwarf Alberta spruce, which is a tree, but it doesn't get much taller than 8 feet tall and is only about 2 or 3 feet wide. So there are some ways that a developer could meet a requirement for additional trees. I don't see an issue with that.
20 is a lot, yeah.
My property, I have an acre and a half, and I just counting them, I got 18 trees. Some of them are really big, some of them are small, but
That's the
that's a
other
lot of trees.
consideration.
20 is a lot of trees.
They do grow and they do get bigger.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
Okay.
Unless you kept them small.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I mean, we're talking about putting brick or stone on the front or whatever, and if you want the front or the back, my house the front is brick. It's all brick, and then the sides and the back are vinyl, and that's kind of what they did with houses. Now, houses, we don't have them rules with houses anyway, but with, well, I guess what I'm saying is I'm not against having, not having it on the sides, and just having different stuff. It doesn't have to be siding. It can be the hardy board or whatever is chosen, but I'm not against it being majority on the front. I think it would look better.
I do like it requires more than one material though, so you couldn't,
Right.
Yeah.
even if you went down to 20% brick, you couldn't just put the rest of the front vinyl because you have to have 3 other materials. So it could have some vinyl, but it would have to have something else too.
Yeah, you'd have to have fiber cement, board and batten, or some other type of
Stucco,
stucco, some other
yeah.
type of material. So, yeah, that's why I put that in there, is to prevent the entire facade from going to one material. So,
I think I would be okay with the 30%, the front and street facing, which, 30, I think 30 would be cool as opposed to 20. But as far as the other two sides, or the other three sides, whatever it is, I don't really have a problem with that. And the reason why I say I don't is because generally that's your backyard, and usually that's not facing the street. But I
So-
agree with you with the wind, I do.
Corner lot or something.
I think what I'm hearing from the council is you like the multiple materials. You want to see more brick and stone on front and side facades. You were indicating around the entire building. I think those are changes I can easily make. If I make those changes, are you good with me moving that through the public process?
Yeah, I have one more question, though. You had mentioned when you were showing the pictures that one building could be all brick and that could be their 30%.
That's the way it's currently written,
Okay.
yes.
Oh, it's currently written that way.
We could change that. We
this-
could
yeah, yeah,
state that
okay.
it could be
Okay.
dispersed throughout the whole building.
See, and I think I would, I don't know. When I think of a developer, I think, oh, they're just going to build this one that's brick and then everything, that's their 30%. Maybe I don't have a lot of confidence in some developers, and maybe that's just my personal
We
problem.
need
but-
to write it so that's not there. That's
Yeah.
not, we don't want that.
So I think it looks better when it's spread out amongst all of them, but that's just my personal opinion. And I don't know if anyone else has a strong opinion about
I
that.
agree with
but-
that.
I agree.
Except I'm just being the devil's advocate.
Please be
So
the
going
devil's
back
advocate.
to the other requirements, so they couldn't really, because
30%,
there
yeah.
has to be not more than 30% of the exterior building facade not requiring brick or stone shall be covered by one. So you have to have a mix.
Well, if we structure it in a way that it's per unit, but if we
So-
do the whole facade for all the townhomes, technically you could do one
So
facade.
you could have one vinyl, one brick, one
Technically,
board and
as it's
batten.
currently written, yes.
Right, but it's still that's still giving
A variety.
a variety.
Yeah.
I don't know, in my mind, it's still variety.
It's an
I
easy
know.
fix. I could just put per unit in there, and then they'd have to have,
But then if you own the one unit that has all vinyl, you're kind of, like in this one, if one of these is all vinyl, right? Because this could be split up into thirds.
Right.
So you could own the one unit that's all brick, or you could own the one that's all vinyl, and
You sure could.
I wouldn't want to own
I
the
wouldn't.
one that's all vinyl, but if that's all that you can afford and buy, then I guess that's what you're stuck with, so.
But then do you go back to so let's say you spread it across all of them, but then you still have to have 3 other materials, and you have this skinny, tall townhome, and 30% of it is brick, and then you have to have 3 other materials on all of those, it's really busy. So I think you either have to go this route, or you have to have less materials, because that's
Yeah.
a lot of.
Was any of them
and
pictures
I like
of the
a lot of
busy?
material, but that's a lot of
Too
materials.
much variation. Okay.
And you did show some of them, some of those other photos with multiple types of materials used, and they actually look pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, this
Yeah.
one is not bad, but it was one that looked even better than that, I thought. Yeah, well, I don't
So
have a
how many
problem with that one.
material, that has 3, brick plus 3?
But the other one only
yeah, it has
has 2.
stone plus 3 materials on that one. They all do. They all have up to 3 to 4 types of materials on the upper walls. This one
I'm
is
good
my
then.
particular favorite. I really like the variation in the materials there.
So trying to,
That one even has tile.
and I have the design eye of a rock, so I'm not going to pretend. But I think, for me, my thought is if we went per unit, requiring brick, and then maybe we lower it to 2. They're required to use 2. If they want to use 3, great, good for them. But maybe 2, if we're having brick per unit, that still gives variety, and it keeps the aesthetics, in my view, looking better, and hopefully is a reduction of cost for the builders. I don't know. So instead of 3, you knock it down to 2, but you're doing it per unit or per building or whatever the delineation is per front door residence. I don't know. So percent brick, and then you use 2 other materials or more.
Should we just leave it, just increase the brick and leave it with 3 and see what the planning commission says, and then? I don't know.
I mean,
I don't have a problem with it. I don't care. I'm okay with the way it is, almost the way it is. But
Okay. I'm good.
30%.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm okay with it moving to the planning commission
Yeah,
and
me
getting
too.
their opinion. I would like the 30%.
But you want 30%, yeah.
I think 30%. I understand we're trying to help developers build at a less expensive, make it more affordable, but I think 30% is fair. I really do.
Yeah, and as we discussed in previous sessions regarding this, it doesn't really it doesn't make the home affordable.
Right.
So it's entirely up to the council on this one.
I'm good.
All right, are we okay?
I'm good with 30% and 3.
I'm good.
Okay, Tony, you're
30% 3 per unit, not, that's the only thing I would add. Per unit, as opposed to you have one brick building and then you have who knows what for the rest of it.
All right,
Let's go with that and see what the planning
That's-
commission
yeah,
says.
we'll go with that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks,
Thank
Andrew.
you.
All right, our next discussion item is the proposed amendments to the annexation policy plan of the Tooele City General Plan presented by Andrew Agard.
You get to hear a lot more from me. I appreciate your time. The city administration and I have been working on revising our annexation policy plan. Before I jump into what we're proposing, I want to just kind of explain what the policy plan is and why we have it. The annexation policy plan is an element of our general plan. And really, the purpose of the annexation policy plan is just to identify areas adjacent to the city's boundaries that can be considered for annexation. So it just says, here's a property, let's talk about annexing it, okay? One of the problems I've encountered with the annexation policy plan is developers and property owners, if they see their property on the plan, they think the city is automatically going to annex that property and provide utilities necessary to satisfy the needs of that property. That's not the purpose of the annexation policy plan. What does it not do? The policy plan does not in any way, shape, or form obligate the city council to annex property into its boundaries, nor does it obligate us to provide services to that property or produce studies justifying the city's denial of any annexation. If a property is identified in the annexation policy plan, the property is therefore able to be considered for annexation, nothing more. It does not force any obligations from the city to a property owner for annexation. If a property is not identified on the annexation policy plan, it cannot be considered for annexation until the plan is amended to include it. As time passes, conditions within and surrounding a city change and evolve. And because of this constant change and evolution of the circumstances, it is wise to revisit the annexation policy plan. So that's what we're proposing to the council today. This is the city's current annexation policy plan. You'll note that on this map there are colored sections labeled A, B, C, D, and so forth. This map was originally approved in 2019, but was amended and adopted in December of 2020. I don't know if you remember when we did the annexation back then, but just south of Utah Avenue, west of the railroad tracks, there was a sliver there that was annexed. We amended the policy plan at that time, so what you're seeing right now is what was amended in 2020. So how have conditions changed within the areas surrounding Tooele City since December of 2019 when we originally ratified this? Number one, RDA has incorporated and is now in its own city with its own jurisdictional authority. Grantsville expanded its boundaries and annexed some of the property that was immediately adjacent to Tooele City. And as you know, water has become extremely difficult to find in order to satisfy the needs of new development. So how do these changes affect the annexation policy plan? So this is a map showing the northern half of Tooele City and the adjacent jurisdictions. On the west, we have the Army Depot, and that's in purple. And we have Grantsville City in the brown, and then RDA City in the red to the north, and we have Pine Canyon Township to the east in the light blue. I should emphasize that Pine Canyon is still unincorporated land. However, it has been assigned a township designation, which does provide Pine Canyon with some authority. They have their own planning commission and their own zoning enforcement mechanisms and so forth. So there is a bit of a jurisdictional authority there in Pine Canyon. The areas indicated in green are currently unincorporated Tooele County and do not fall under any other jurisdiction. The southern half of the city, again, we have the Tooele Army Depot to the west, and then Pine Canyon to the east. The areas in red are located within the Army Depot. That's federally controlled, so it's not likely we're going to be able to annex that. And then the other areas in red are Pine Canyon Township, and then the areas in green are unincorporated Tooele County. The proposed changes that the administration and I are proposing, this would be the annexation policy plan as it reflects the current conditions. And it's the Section A, which is in property that is entirely surrounded by Tooele City. And that is a good candidate for annexation if that ever happens. So why such drastic changes to our plan? Let's go through each area and kind of take a look at those. This is the northern section. These areas, Area A, Area B, Area I, Area J, and Area C are located in RDA City. They are not able to be annexed. The only way we could ever annex those is if they de-annexed from RDA through a long legal procedure and then annex into Tooele City. Not likely to happen. I've only seen one de-annexation. It was when a large chunk of Bluffdale de-annexed and ended up going back to, going to Harriman City. And that process took years. It was a messy process. Area H remains unincorporated. However, there is no water there and there is no available sewer outfall. So the development potential on that property is almost nil without somebody investing a very large amount of money. The eastern side of the city, Area K, and the northern half of Area D are areas located in the Pine Canyon Township where they already have their own township protections. And then the southern portions of Area D are areas that remain unincorporated. However, they also do not have water and sewer and would provide significant burden on the city to annex those areas. And then the western and southern portions of the city. As I mentioned, the Area F is currently in the Army Depot, not likely to ever be annexed. And then Area E is largely undevelopable land. That's mountainous terrain. And the slopes there are too great and they prohibit development. And then Area G is just too far south. There are no utilities there they could even connect to, without great cost by either the city or developer. So how much land is available within Tooele City's current incorporated boundaries for residential development? I'd like to do a shout out to Marissa Snyder in the Public Works Department. She worked with me to put together this map that shows us currently vacant residential property or residentially zoned property in the city, as well as underdeveloped residential property. The blue properties are properties that have no development. They're just vacant land that could be developed as residential. The purple properties are properties that may have a home on them but have 2 acres or more behind them that's just vacant land. I do need to state that this is an underestimate. There are additional properties that we did not have the time to put on this map. But what we have showing on this map is 3,542 acres of land within Tooele City's boundaries that can be developed residentially. And I believe the number to be even greater because there's a lot of property that currently has a house on it but is vacant behind it. The question may be asked, what if the property is identified in the future as a good candidate for annexation and is no longer identified on the annexation policy plan? It's easy. We just amend the annexation policy plan and put it back on there. So this doesn't necessarily limit the ability if in the future a property is a good candidate for annexation. But we also think that changing the plan to reflect current conditions is wise and also communicates to developers that we're interested more in developing inside our city right now where development needs to occur. So that's what we're proposing. If you have any comments or feedback, I'm happy to entertain those for you. And if you're good with what we have, I'll start moving it through the process. It's going to take more than just a map amendment. The general plan has a lot of language in there that goes to those areas that'll have to be amended as well, but I'd be happy to move that through the process.
Any questions or comments?
I'm curious on that 3,500 acres, how much of it's on the north end of town where it's open?
I'd say at least 3/4 of it's on the north end of
It's
town.
mostly there. And that, I guess only in the overlake area is all the water committed to, right? Not to the whole.
That's correct.
I think what's being proposed makes common sense and seems reasonable to me. I'm comfortable with it moving forward.
When we say, though, that, because there's a property that tried to annex into Tooele City, it wasn't approved, but that would be removed from this annexation plan, right? We say it's easy for them to come and say, we want to annex in again, but do they bear the cost of that? I know they bear the cost of all the studies and everything, but to change our plan, is there like a fee where they have to come in and say, hey, we want to annex in? Or is it just like they request it, and then what's the step if there's no annexation plan? How do they?
So if they're not identified on the annexation policy plan, they would need to submit an application and pay a fee for a map amendment. Basically, it's a land use or a general plan amendment. And they would then go through the process and make the presentation to the city council as why they should be added to the annexation policy plan. At that time, if the council were to approve that, then you could begin the process of considering annexing the property. And that's when you'd start looking at the studies and making sure they provide the information that you need. So they could easily, there would be a fee involved.
Okay.
It's
So
based on the
this is my
acreage.
concern with the infill that we talk about all the time, about developers building in the infill. My problem with that is they're splitting lots, right? There's an acre and they're building 4 houses, and we're never seeing the type of houses I think we still need in our community. Of course we need affordable housing, but we still lack these houses or developments that we see in Stansbury and Grantsville, like half-acre lots and things like that, where we keep trying to bring businesses to our community, and with more businesses and high-paying jobs, we want those people to live in our community. At least that's what I want. I don't want them to commute around the mountain to live in their house that they want. And I think there are areas in our community that are appropriate to annex in. And those are the areas where I think we see those custom homes and we see higher end homes where we keep those people who I want to see in our community. I think they should be able to live in our community and not have to work in Tooele and then go live somewhere else. And I don't think we have any housing like that besides the East Bench. I know there's some land up there that's for sale, but it's not developable at this point. There's water with that, but no one's developing that either. So I don't agree with cutting everything out of the annexation plan. I think we do keep some of these areas that could potentially be appropriate to annex in. So that's where I stand on that. Sounds like other people may not stand there, but.
I'd be open to discussion. I remember, we was on the member of the city council when the general plan was redone and annexation plans.
Right.
And they subtracted and added some of these. At that time, just like to, rethink of how that happened and why they added and why they didn't take them away. A lot of it was from the planning commission, and that's why I think I remember it, because I was there when they were doing it. But I more agree with you. Yeah.
And it's still not guaranteeing an annexation. It's just saying that we will consider these pieces of land.
Exactly.
I mean, I get the opposite argument that annexing in more land, it cost us money as a city. I understand our water situation, but I just don't see that the infill areas are going to be developed like we anticipate. But I don't know. Because there's areas where I live that they've been empty lots for so long, and maybe they'll be developed now, but they're going to be, most developers want to build multi-residential. That's why we're changing these ordinances, because we're seeing such an increase of that, which that doesn't necessarily help our water situation either if we're rezoning and increasing our density in areas. So I don't know. I think there is an appropriate annexation plan, and I agree that we get rid of where ERDA incorporated, the Grantsville, areas like that, even on the south end of town, I don't know if that's necessary where we would see a lot of growth, but going up Smelter Road, I think that would be a beautiful area to live in if a developer was willing to put the money into it and incorporate it into Tooele City. So what does the council want to see brought to the Planning Commission?
Go ahead.
Well, I think, and I know we have strong feelings about annexation, especially given the latest thing, but the long and short of it is it didn't pass. And that's the fact. And so it didn't pass, and there's reasons why, and it could be debated again, but I don't think we need to go there. But I think since it didn't pass, it's not part of consideration. And if they want to go through the process again, and they certainly can, and that's the right of any property owner to make that petition. I think what this plan does is clean up what we have now and say what makes sense. And the proposal as outlined in Section A, I don't mean to be presumptuous, I don't think anyone on this council thinks, well, that's a bad idea. That makes complete sense. I mean, there's no question. RDA, I agree with Justin, Councilman Brady. That makes sense. Let's strike that. No question. To me, the only hiccup seems to be the previous annexation request. It seems to be the only catching point where there might be reasonable minds disagreeing. I think it should be struck, but I understand a reasonable person saying why it wouldn't be struck. So maybe we send it through the process and see what other entities and boards decide. And I'm open to leaving it open for that to be a decision for another board, and then it eventually comes to us and we do that. Because I don't disagree with Councilman Brady. I think he makes reasonable arguments. I just disagree on that one particular parcel.
I'm not just saying that one either, though. I think the Smelter Road, that's a significant area, and it'll never be developed, which to some people that's good, that it will never be developed because of the zoning and the sewer situation in the county, right? You know right now that unless it's a 5-acre parcel, it's not going to be developed. And I think you leave it open, and I think it could be beneficial. So I'm not just saying the one that we have voted on, but I think the Smelter Road, the Anaconda Road area could be beneficial to the community someday. So,
Council, I just, when we have gone over this and talked about what do we do with all of that, some of the parcels that are in the current plan that are in unincorporated area makes sense to me that you could still leave those if we had a different water situation. And when we talk about maybe having all of these removed and then someone coming back in and we're making them pay to change the plan, if you at any point things change and maybe we hit gold, or water, that's what it is.
Both.
When we are able to obtain more water and we feel we are at a comfortable place to expand the limits of our city, and I agree that your little infill lots are just little here, but we have a contract in place that we're still going to build over 3,000 more homes on the north end of the city that we have to supply water for. That's my biggest concern, and I just don't want to see administration or staff put under a requirement to annex more property in that I can't supply water to. That is my biggest concern. But you can change this plan back at any point without having to charge a developer or anyone else the money. You can still do that when times change. Maybe interest rates will go back down one day. And again, maybe we will find more water more quickly. But until those happen, that is the greatest concern here is water.
I guess I don't see what the difference is. If we're going to, I see some in the other towns that they're in another town, we probably shouldn't have them, but if we vote it down one way or vote it, if it's there and we bring it back, it's still, we're going to either deny an annexation or agree to bring it back into the city. It seems like, I don't know, we're changing the boundary or where it's going to be for the same discussion. I don't see that we're changing the discussion much.
Right. I think the biggest motivation, echoing what Mayor Wynn said, is we just want the annexation policy map to reflect the current conditions that the city is experiencing.
And especially to remove those areas that are now in another city.
And I definitely agree that we should remove everything that's in another city, but I am torn about the county, the parts that are not in another city, because I think it's semantics. I mean, just because it's in a plan doesn't mean it happens. We've seen that it doesn't just happen. You know, we go through a process every time, so that process is still in place. It's a pretty tough process. It's very lengthy, and you can do years of work and still not be annexed. So I just don't know why we have to add that one more step when we have all the steps in place already. If it's, you know, if it's in our plan, it doesn't mean anything. We don't have to provide water. They still have to go through the whole thing, and that's one of our discussion items. So I don't know why it's bad to have the discussion. But I'm good to see it through.
Yeah, I think we can,
Move it into the public process, send it to Planning Commission, and
yeah,
Bring it back
I
for the
always
city council.
appreciate their input and their discussion, so I'm fine with moving it forward. I don't agree with how it stands right now, but if you share with them the input that we've given, hopefully they're aware of all that already, so.
I can do that.
Okay, all right, any other questions, comments?
Good with that.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate
Okay,
it.
thanks, Andrew. We only have 9 minutes. We do have a closed meeting tonight, but I think it would be just in the interest of time that we just recess from our work meeting. We'll come back for our business meeting, and then we'll reconvene for a closed meeting after our business meeting. Everyone okay with that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
No, that wasn't the plan.
What? Do you need a motion?
No.
Okay.
So we'll recess,
Okay.
and then we'll reconvene for our business meeting at 7.
I was just saying that wasn't in the plan.
This meeting should be short now, so.
I know. That's what I said.